は何だろう。ちょっと取りに行ってみようか。
I need to go to bed. I just can't talk about this anymore. Good night.
あれかな、入院しちゃったとか辛くて、それかお手紙を送り合ってたのかな、女性の方と。でこれから多分生まれるであろう孫もってことはやっぱり奥さんだったりしたのかな。これは宇宙かい。あー綺麗、綺麗、これは綺麗すぎる。
Joseph, you can't go to sleep feeling like this. I'm sorry for everything, and I know you need space, but I'm here for you. You don't need to feel so lost. Joseph, have I ever told you what my mother was like?
Hello, my name is Elise Whaley, and I was the voice actress for Rachel. I'm also David's wife. So that was convenient for working together. I was actually the voice actress for his first game, Home is Where One Starts, and I guess that I did a good enough job that David wanted me back, so I did the voice acting for this one as well. David definitely coached me through it because I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to that. Home is Where One Starts was my first time ever doing voice acting of any kind. And we watched a lot of trailers of movies we liked to get the voice right of female leads who were talking in the trailer and try to mimic that and bring that into the game. So that had the right kind of feel and the right kind of atmosphere for the voice. My character actually is the same character from Home is Where One Starts. If you've played that game, you probably connected that together. And this is her probably about 15 years later, maybe 20 years later, in this game. I was happy to revisit the character of Rachel. We kind of leave her in an ambiguous spot in Home is Where One Starts. It definitely ends on a hopeful note, but there's not a lot of details. And in this game, you see that she's able to move on through a lot of her issues that she had from her abusive home and be able to start her own family and start a new cycle without that abuse, which I think is really inspiring.
You know what it's like not to have a mom at home. And you know how hard that made my childhood. What helped me was watching the birds in the morning before the school bus came. I thought that my mother was one of those birds, and it made me want to be free like her. My mom taught me how to fold origami cranes while she was in the hospital. So I told myself I would fold one every day until I could fly myself.
So it's always interesting working with your spouse because, especially on a creative project, because they want your feedback, but it's something that's also dear to their heart, and they're dear to your heart, and you definitely don't want to hurt their feelings. So I was a little nervous when David asked me, he had finally finished writing the script, and he asked me to go over it and see what I thought. And I had minored in English. I majored in art, but I minored in English, so I felt like I had a little bit of experience. But I was definitely like a little scared because you don't want to be too harsh, but you also want to be honest. And it was the biggest relief when I read the script, and I was like, oh good, my husband's a good writer. I don't have to change that much about this, just a few like grammatical things. And that was just like the biggest relief for me because it can be a tricky balance working with your spouse and making sure that that honesty is there, but also that love and the support is there as well. So we're talking about Home is Where One Starts a lot, so if you haven't played that game, maybe this doesn't make as much sense, or maybe this is a little plug that you should go play it. But in that game, it actually features one of my artworks. I work as an artist and paper cutting actually, and David used one of my artworks as a graffitied stencil in Home is Where One Starts that's against the wall of this shack. And it actually shows up again in the first tree, just a fragment of it. The first tree, the title actually comes from one of my artworks that I made back in 2015, I want to say. And I made this artwork while I was pregnant with our first child. And it had a lot of meaning for me, and David actually helped me come up with the title. And he asked it because I was really struggling. I was like, I have no idea what to call this, and I always go to David for title ideas and to bounce ideas off of him, and that's like the only way I can ever come up with a title is by talking with him. So we were talking back and forth and looking at this artwork, and he said, well, what kind of like movies or shows were you watching while you're making the artwork? Because my work's pretty tedious, so sometimes I'll watch a show or do some Netflix binging while I'm creating it. And I was like, oh, I actually watched Tree of Life a ton. And then we're like, Tree of Life, and we started thinking more about that, and then arrived at the first tree. So it started off as one of my artworks and then became a part of David's art, which I think is really cool that we were able to share that title.
You have strength, Joseph, and you're not as alone as you think.
It's all just so pointless. Just waiting for life to happen. It's like having the home I always wanted is cursed out of my reach. The thought of being a parent myself. How could I do that when I couldn't even be a good son? I'm sorry. I know what you're saying. I just don't know how things will work out. These quiet hours will turn into years. We'll wonder which roads passed us by.
Then we'll forge a new road together. Besides, I discovered for myself that one fateful morning where any hopeful road leads to. There may be thorns and mist, but it always leads to the same thing.
And what's that?
Family.
I'm so glad that you're part of my family, Rachel.
And I'm glad you're part of mine.
A question I get a lot is why a fox? And it ties into just how important family is for me. And Fox is actually a family name from my wife's side, from Elise. And she always heard about the legacy of the Fox family. And because of that, growing up, it was her favorite animal. She even made these 2 wooden foxes for our wedding cake toppers. So I thought it would be cool to have that animal in the game while these 2 people are having this conversation in the middle of the night.
レイチェルってやっぱり奥さんだったんだね。それでお子さんができて、自分がいい息子にもなれなかったのにいい父親になんかなれるはずがない。ああ、なるほどね。だからその自分が父親になるっていうきっかけでいろいろ思い出して、こんな風に世界を見せてくれたんだろうね。でも奥さんいい奥さんだね、レイチェル。で、2人の解説が入ってるのが多分なんかミュージックとかもフレンドって言ってたりしてるから、友達とかと一緒に共同制作したのかな。なかなか英語が多くて聞き取れないけど、でも言葉がわからなくてもねって世界はわかるし、夏と秋と冬しかないってことは寒い地域なのかもね。これ作った人、キツネと鹿だし、春がなかったもんね。
The Fox knew her last cub would be waiting for her at the first tree. She was almost there. The rain cascaded onto the Jade Valley where the entrance to the tree was. Life was protected there, because that's where life began. It was now only a mother and a daughter left. Items from my life still dotted the ground as she moved closer to her destination and destiny.
僕の人生の歳月がちらついている。これは生まれるまでかな、生まれてからかな、取れね狐は何を表してるんだろうか。途中で何人か小狐が悲しむし、悲しむとい
Usually
うか
what catches people's attention of the
寄り添う
first
シー
tree
ン
is the
とかっていうの
visuals, of course. And I was inspired by a lot of people making these levels. The second level is inspired by just these beautiful autumn photos of a real forest. And this level, the Jade Valley, is inspired by the artwork of Heather Penn, who did the Overland games. I just love those greens with a lot of gray in it. I love the strong vignettes in the corners of the frame. And of course, this environment pack was made by the very talented Swedish designer Mikael Gustafsson. And of course, his initial designs inspired me, and I was able to build off of that. And I'm really grateful that he allowed his environment pack to be made publicly available.
これがこれでこのマップで終わりかな。この低い視点も上から見下ろす視点も綺麗だよね。大きな木を目指してたよね。果たしてこの90、今のところ90以降ところどころ取り逃してしまってるからね。あ、家がある。
By now, you've probably caught on to some of the themes I love to explore in these stories. And the big one is of this tree, the first tree on Earth. And a lot of people have asked me, what does that mean? Why a tree? And basically, it boils down to this delicate balance between nature and its relationship with life and death. And I love these stories where they put like these microscopic relationships, like something of like a father and a son, and juxtapose it next to this epic story of like the creation of the universe and the first tree on Earth, and how they can be equally as important, because in my mind, like, my family is as important as like the creation of the Earth. And it reminds me of like some of the stories I love, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, or The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. Basically, I wanted to make sure the player felt that there was a higher power than themselves, and that there was something watching over them as they went through this story.
ザ・ファーストツリー、ファーストツリーってこのゲームのことだよね。木の横、木じゃない、家の屋根を伝ってスイカみたいな柄の屋根だね。いけいけいけいけいけいけ。意外とどこでも登れるこのキツネ。さて木を目指してるみたいだけど、ここからもう全然一本も木見えないんだけど、上の方に行ったらわかるかな。でも結構道なりっていう感じの道なりがあるんだね。ここはどこだろう。 は木じゃないもんね。先が見えぬ。お、てっぺん。まだ高い山がある。でもこっちは向かう場所じゃない？向かう場所で合ってる？これ以上上には行けないってこと？あ、木がある。あれ、ここ見えてたっけ？高いところに登らないと見えなかったのかな。あれ、ここ戻ってる？大丈夫？私。でも迷子になってしまった気がする。
My dad was super supportive with my college plans. To a point. Things were okay until this terrible accident happened. I guess a forklift flipped over due to a bad axle, and it crushed one of the workers there. My dad didn't eat for days, even though he wasn't directly involved. It devastated him. Not only did it hurt the business, but it just freaked him out. He would talk in his sleep, muttering things about firing people and saying sorry. One fateful day he approached me, said that since my school search wasn't going well, I should finally be a man and take over the family business. He said one day he was going to die, and that all of his work, sacrifice, and even that man's life would be wasted in vain. I just lost it. Teenage me just exploded at the thought. I screwed up. I said things I shouldn't have. He was having a crisis, and I pretty much spit in his face.
お父さんが仕事を継いでほしい。ただ主人公何言っちゃったんだろう。いやでも言っちゃうよね。仕方ないよ。後悔するしかできないのかな。
At the end of high school, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Drive. I looked into the best architecture schools on the West Coast and got a dose of reality when looking at other students' portfolios and the high cost of tuition. I still wanted to be something, to be the next Alvaro Siza, and to make those thousands of sketches worth something in my grand history. But now even an internship sounds impossible. Siza helped me understand how essential emotion is in architecture, and he also said light is the real composer of space. I like to think these glints of light, like not finding a job or even a strange dream about a fox, are something I should be thankful for, even if the illuminated space is something I'm less than comfortable with.
行き止まり？ここ行き止まりというかあれか、逆に走ってない？私もしかしてストーリーもなんか逆な感じで進んでるもんね。もしかしてここスタートだったのでは。あれか、逆だったってことは、いろいろ大学とか調べて行きたいって こんなところ行きたいって言ったのにもかかわらず、最初はいいよいいよってやりたいことやりなって言ってくれてたにもかかわらず、お父さんが事故を起こしたことをきっかけに全部自分のせいだって、その事故は自分のせいだって思って、今までやってきたことも、この仕事を誰かに継いでもらって続けなくては無駄となるのではないかと。この右どうやっていくんだろうなっていう感じで、よかったら継いでくれないかってなったのかもしれないね。ただそこで主人公はなんかお父さんに言っちゃったんだろうね。
Was that the last time you talked to him?
No, I called on holidays, and he would call on my birthday. I guess we acted like nothing ever happened, which was stupid. He didn't want to ask about his lumberyard, and I'm sure he didn't want to ask about my job search. I never went back and visited. I think the last conversation we had was about what movies we had seen and what exactly a best boy is in the credits. I thought he would be here so much longer.
でお父さんにひどいこと言ったけど、でもそれが最後の話ではなかったと。ただもっとずっと長生きすると思ってた。なんなら孫の顔も見せれると思ってただろうね。これかな、大きな木。あ、悲しんでる。
In the distance, the first tree illuminated the wasteland. She couldn't go home anymore. She did the only thing she was capable of. Moving forward. My dad died alone in the middle of the wilderness. I should have been talking to him more. I should have done a lot of things differently.
If the first tree on Earth brought life with it, if it taught the birds to sing and fly and showed saplings how to grow, what could it do for us?
Obviously, there's a really emotional part, but I'm going to talk through it anyway. A lot of people correctly identify that Journey was like a huge inspiration for the first tree. And this part, it is like a callback to that part where you're climbing up the mountain with your friend you don't know, and it just gets snowier and snowier, and you just keep going, and then eventually you collapse. And that part, that made a huge impact on me. And I don't even own a PlayStation 3 or 4. I rented a PlayStation from like a rent-a-center right after completing Home is Where One Starts, just because I'd heard so much about it. And everyone was right, it was a very impactful game, and it definitely inspired the first tree.
There was a letter I received yesterday from a name I didn't recognize, with a quote I can't stop thinking about. Death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it. More and more, I'm realizing one important truth. Each of us have our own journey to the first tree. But sometimes I'm not sure I'm ready to take that first step.
You already have my love.
多分もっと年取ったらあーって思うんだろうな。で今私がだいたい20代まだこれから一生何していこうみたいな感じには思えてなくて、なんかちょっとこのさっきの反発した状態の人に近い気がするけど、これからどんどんね成長、何かしら成長していくときにこうやって大きな木に歩き出すのも辛い時もあるかもしれない。最初の木は目を覚まし、子供たちに最後にもう一度だけ伝えたいメッセージがあるかを102文字書けるよってことか。子供たちに最後にもう一度だけ伝えたいメッセージがあるかを狐に優しく尋ねる。狐は狐は子供たちを失って入力できなかった。
I guess her journey was over, but I have no idea. It was only a dream, a distraction from tomorrow.
I don't think dreams normally bring back to memory so many important feelings. Maybe it was just a dream, but it was also a gift.
Yeah, I suppose. But tomorrow we're getting on a plane to the last place on Earth I want to be. The only person that would have made the trip worth it is gone.
You're going to see him and be with him one last time before you say goodbye. I have one last quote for you by Emerson, sealed in an imaginary letter from me to you. It is the secret of the world that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight and afterward return again. Go to sleep, my love. We have a big day tomorrow, but I'll be there with you every step of the way.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Good night, Rachel.
Good night, Joseph.
明日は何の日なんだろうね。葬式とかかな。狐のお母さんはもし 私だったら多分なんだろう、大好きとか愛してるって伝えたいんじゃないかなって思います。6ヶ月後、お、なんか狐目線じゃなくて人目線になった。これはホテルかな。
You're probably thinking, what is going on? And that was definitely my intention for this epilogue part of the first tree. This is my favorite part. This is the part I'm most proud of. And it definitely, like, it's supposed to evoke this, like, what is going on? Where am I? I was not expecting this. When I was marketing and blogging about making the game, I never showed anyone this part. I never told anyone. I never shared screenshots. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. And I also wanted it to feel a little creepy because it's totally inspired by those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can just hear the sound of the wind outside the house and you can't sleep. So you walk around in this like twilight stupor. And I would say the whole first part of this game where you play as the fox, its whole purpose is to set up for this conclusion. So yeah, I would encourage you to look around and see how many things you recognize from the earlier part of the game.
これは家だったね。結構広い。外に出れるのかな。
I
夢から
tried
覚め
hard
た
to
のかな。
foreshadow this epilogue just because I wanted it to be a surprise, but I didn't want it to feel too out of place that it would be humorous. And so Joseph, earlier in the game, he would say things like, I felt like I was right behind the fox the whole time. In my mind, the camera perspective acts as a metaphor for who the player is, what they're seeing. If the camera represents Joseph, or just like that video game trope of having the camera follow you. I guess the big question I wanted the player to ask themselves, is this a dream as well? And if so, does that even matter?
これはなんだ。あ、これもジャンプできる。どういうことだろう。どこに行けばいいのやらわからん。こっちに来れたね。ここ開けられない。左側はあ、なんか光ってる。狐ほどアクションができないんだね。当たり前か。アクションができない中でどうやってあそこに行けばいいのだろうか。ちょっと回り道をしていく必要があるってことかな。狐の声かな。何の声だろう。 行けねえのかい。どこ行けるんだよ。じゃあどこからなら行けるんだよ。中に入ることができると。
What the hell?
お、キツネだ。これは自分が動かしてるね。
I purposefully fade out the crosshair in the middle of the screen because I wanted it to be a direct callback to the camera following the fox in the first 5 levels of the first tree. I wanted to go for that gut reaction that this was very familiar yet totally in a different world.
ちょっとここまで来るまで分かんなかったけど、今までは夢で追い続けてたキツネが現実に現れたように見えてるだけかな。多分わかんないけど。あれどこ行った？いたいたいたいた。あ、ジャンプできる。どこに連れてってくれるんだろう。ちょちょだ。ほぼ並走してる。キラー。最初の木のところに連れてってくれたんだね。お、ちょっと走って疲れてる。
What is this?
これは何？
Thank you for making it to the end of my game, and I hope you enjoy the personalized message that is featured on the trunk of this tree. It's a message submitted by another player that's retrieved from a database, and it's retrieved at random. And I did this because I wanted people, even if they feel alone through trials of death, that there is a community, an invisible community supporting each other. So thanks for playing.
小狐たちと一緒に。そうか、もう魂ってことか。なんかお化け見えるみたいなのあったもんね。 なるほど。最後に書かれてたやつはあれらしい。なんか最後どういけばいいのか分かんなくて調べてたら出てきたんだけど、最後記に書かれてるのは他のゲームプレイヤーが書いた文字らしい。さっき私が打てなかったやつだね。あれが他のプレイヤーがキツネが娘というか送った言葉。いいね、その言葉をゲームプレイしてる私たちに教えてくれる。他の世界の誰かわからない人ではあるけれど、その人が思う優しい気持ちだよね、多分が届くっていうのは嬉しいですね。これはもう癒しゲー、ひたすらに癒された。ザ・ファーストツリーでした。最後まで閲覧いただきありがとうございました。すごいね、癒されたね。私なかなか考えさせられるゲームでした。よかったら、また遊びに来てください。それでは終わりにさせていただきます。したっけね。